Wyatt, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.
Now, what has been the political response to this?
Yeah, it's been pretty mixed because, of course, on the issue of Israel and Palestine, you obviously have a mixed political response. You have a number of people who have come out and who have said that they feel as if the festival should have pulled the movie altogether and should have remained principled in their stances to pull the movie because, of course, they pulled it. And now the CEO of the TIFF Music Festival has come out and has said, actually, no, we're going to continue to move forward with it. So I think people right now are frustrated with, again, kind of the lack of principle involved in this, and people wish that if they were going to take a definitive stance, that it would have been definitive and it wouldn't have kind of made a 180 multiple times over the issue, because again, this is a pretty hot button kind of theocratic issue where people's perspective on it is very much shaped by their religious beliefs as well, and so people obviously have differing religious beliefs, and so if they're going to make such decision to either have the film or not have a film, then they would have had to kind of do that again in a definitive way. I also think that it's important to note that, them coming out and removing the film focused on October the 7th, the massacre that happened in Israel, is something that I think they should have known it was going to ignite such a public response. Maybe they should have decided from the beginning, we're not going to, screen any films relating to such a controversy rather than, initiating it in the beginning. I think they could have certainly avoided all of this if they just said from the very beginning, look, it's a very important message that, you're trying to get across in your film, but at the same time, again, it's a very religious issue. It's, a very controversial issue, and we just can't move forward with this in such a, public, really, iconic in a number of different ways institution. And so that's, I think, kind of what's been, happening. And you have a number of people, elected officials, both federally and provincially, who have come out and who have issued statements basically saying that they think the music festival dropped the ball on this, even now with their decision to screen the movie, going back to their original decision. Because again, it shows kind of a lack of principle and a lack of morals and a lack of being willing to stand behind what they believe in.
And has TIFF pulled movies in the past that they feared would spark political update? And how will this affect the reputation of the film festival moving forward? Because, as you've mentioned, a lot of people aren't happy. There are people signing petitions both for and against the doc being released. So what do you think the backlash is going to be with this?
I mean, I think at this point, coming out and saying you support Israel or coming out and saying you support Palestine is almost more kind of revealing than coming out and saying which political party you support, right? Because I think right now it's almost more controversial than that, because like you can find people on both sides, both liberals, both conservatives, who support either Israel or Palestine. And so it's actually, I think, more revealing in many cases now where, someone stands on this type of an issue. So again, a cultural institution like the TIFF Film Festival comes out and they, try and take a stance on this issue, which they didn't even have to say anything beyond pulling the film, because it was made clear just simply by doing that they were just willing to kind of bow down to whatever kind of the public backlash was. And so, yeah, I don't think they would have made any different decision if it was a Palestinian film that they were trying to release and then they pulled it and then the public had a lot of reaction on that. And then they said, actually, no, let's reinstate the film. And so I think, again, that just speaks to the fact that they were willing to do whatever, the public backlash was kind of pushing them to do, because they are trying to maintain their reputation. Of course, it's had the opposite effect, and this is kind of the typical crisis communications and PR management that you often see that never goes well, because companies are trying to do whatever they can to try and uphold their reputation in a time, again, when there is a crisis for their company. And so that's certainly what we're seeing here in the way of the film festival. And I think moving forward, it's going to have to be, kind of just a broad kind of question with respect to how do some of these institutions, even companies, come out and just try to avoid some of these issues, avoid some of the controversial issues. Even, corporate companies, places like Starbucks, places like McDonald's, they've been at kind of the epicenter of this debate as well, not only for what they've said, but for what they've not said. And you have people coming out, posting on social media saying that they're going to boycott these different companies because they didn't issue a public statement in response. So I think regardless of, what side of the debate you're on, it's going to be hard for some of these companies to please people. But I would say the bottom line should be, again, if you're a corporate company, no one in, whether it be Gaza or whether it be Israel, is going to benefit from a corporate company in Canada or in the United States coming out and, saying and issuing a statement, pretending as if their solidarities are with them. I don't really think the words mean as much as the actions that governments can take.
Well, in regards to actions, I mean, celebrities like Amy Schumer have come out and are signing petitions basically saying that the decision that TIFF made isn't valid. So, how important do you think that a voice like Amy Schumer or thousands of the other celebrities that are now signing this petition, or the other celebrities that are on the other side of the debate, how important do you think their voices are for, I mean, just us regular people that are also listening to these conversations and influencing people's decisions on TIFF's decision, but also just the war going on in general?
Yeah, honestly, I think people like whether it's Amy Schumer, whether it's people like Howie Mandel, I mean, people who are, I think a lot of what you've seen actually is the public figures, the celebrities who have came out and who have taken a definitive stance over this issue are people at the other side of it where, they're issuing pro-Gaza statements, etc. So I think right now when you're seeing these people come out and issuing their support for Israel, whether or not you agree with it, I think it's fair to say that it's principled just in the sense of they're willing to come out and take a stance that not many other people, especially in Hollywood and again, other public figures are willing to do. So that's, certainly one component of it. But again, I think that just regardless of what side of the issue you fall on, as long as you are willing to be principled in your stance and not change your belief, depending on how the public is responding to it, I think that should be the bottom line. That should be kind of the line that everybody holds. Because people right now have a tendency to just, whenever things aren't going their way, to change their perspective to whatever the media or whatever kind of the public narrative is shifting towards. And so I think we need to try and avoid that as much as possible.
Now, you touched a little bit on the backlash that Starbucks has gotten for their take on the war that is going on currently, but do you think we could see other cultural institutions plagued by such controversial issues?
I mean, you're certainly starting to see that. And again, I think right now the biggest example is corporate companies, just because that's where people give their money to. And so they're not necessarily as concerned with cultural institutions, but you've seen it with political campaigns. You've seen it with just about everything now. I was just in Washington where going to the Hall of the States building, which is where all of the major media networks have their studios and their newsrooms. And there was massive protests outside of that building in DC again, because people were frustrated with how the media is covering this issue. If you go to some of the different corporate headquarters for various companies, whether it be in Canada, whether it be in the United States, you're likely to find protests there. There's been protests outside of the house of Anita Anand, the foreign affairs minister, for people who are frustrated with her. So I think people are going to protest regardless of what side of the issue they fall on. They're going to try and make their voices heard, and they're going to try and tie a company or a person or an institution's stance on this issue of Israel and Palestine to kind of their reputation and to their morals. Because again, regardless of what side of the issue you're on, whether it's pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, then I think people will try and take that stance and attach it to your morals. Somehow, if you're pro-Israel, that automatically means that you have bad morals and that you don't care about civilians. Or if you're pro-Gaza, that automatically means that you're pro-Hamas and that you don't care about the Israeli people. And I think it's possible to recognize that you can kind of play this balancing game where it is just such a complex geopolitical issue where people, whether it be in Canada, whether it be in the United States, don't actually have any on-the-ground experience. They don't actually know what's happening on the ground. So maybe it's like not the worst idea for people to just sit back and not take a definitive stance in North America and the Western world. I think more people probably should recognize that.
Well, Wyatt, thank you for breaking that down for us.
Thank you.